Okay, on to privacy. So authority is all about who do we trust. Privacy is all about what information gets out to the world. Who gets to see what things about which people. So that's also an issue that has, well, it's certainly always been contentious, but it's getting even more contentious for a few reasons that I'm about to outline. So privacy before the electronic age, I usually just say the web, because the web is kind of the big turning point in the history of information going out, from information going out through very specific publisher channels, magazines and newspapers and television, etc., to information going out from everybody to everybody all the time with these very large organizations like Google and Facebook and Microsoft, etc. So what were the kind of the bulwarks or the firewalls or the guardians of the privacy of your information before the web came out? Well, curtains, blinds on the windows. In fact, I'm looking around here and there's blinds on those windows. I can't see what's going on in there. All I have to do is block your senses and you're blocked from knowing anything about me before electronics. Before electronics, there was nothing really I could do to know what went on behind the closed door. There was nothing I could do to hear a conversation that was out of my earshot. There was nothing that I could do to get at your information, because your information was protected physically. There was an air wall, we like to call it. Like if I take a computer and I block it from any network, there's an air wall between the computer and the network. What that means is there's no way of communication. There's no way of getting the information from place A to place B. Well, of course, that's all changed. In the past, when I destroyed something, for example, I had a contract and I wrote that contract on a piece of paper and you signed it and I signed it and then I burned it, gone. No contract, because it's now gone. It's destroyed is destroyed, and it was very easy to say things have been destroyed. When the library at Alexandria burned, boy, was a lot of information destroyed. Why? Because it was only there in that one place. Could not be copied, was not copied, and didn't exist anywhere except that one place. You burn the library at Alexandria, and then all of a sudden, poof, all that information's gone. That's the past. And in the past, also, because information was mainly sensory, a lot of the information that we knew about each other came from conversations with third parties. This idea of telephone that we talked about before, where person A tells person B, tells person C, tells person D, and then, by the time it gets to E and F, the story is completely distorted. It's not at all like what actually happened. So in the past, a lot of information that we had about each other was what you'd call hearsay. I heard it, and then I said it. And we all know that that's untrustworthy. It's always been known that that's untrustworthy. And so hearsay, for example, in courts is not admitted. You can't convict somebody of a crime because you heard somebody else talking about the fact that they did that crime, right? It's not okay. It's not able. So it's not a valid way of it's not valid. Now, that's the old world, where you could hide stuff really easily, you could destroy stuff really easily, and a lot of what we knew about each other came through third parties, so there wasn't really, there wasn't much you could trust about it, and you could always say, well, that person has an agenda. All right, now what's the new world? In the new world, curtains don't count, right? We're able to see inside of all sorts of things. There's all sorts of ways of getting at information that is physically hidden, because it's electronic and it moves through wires, and destroyed is not destroyed. There's always a copy of stuff somewhere. We've talked about this before. Copies are very persistent. Copies keep cropping up. There's no way to know that all the copies of the information that you once created are destroyed. So these things are all gone. Hearsay has been replaced by copying. We've talked about this idea of repeating in a conversation, where you literally repeat what somebody else said, and it's a high fidelity. It's a complete and good copy of what was already there, and so it's not hearsay anymore. It's actually what they said. You can go and get the cell phone video of some policeman beating someone else up. It's not that I saw a policeman beating somebody up. There it is. You can see it for yourself. So those old methods are sort of blown away in this electronic environment. So what replaces them as the safeguards, as the ways that private information stays private? Well, first of all, your desire to disclose that information is bulwark number one. If you never put that information down in any tangible form, then it can't move around, it can't be copied, there's nothing to destroy, and that information is safe. Information about myself that I keep in my head and never put into my computer is safe. The user agreement, and now we're going to get more particularly specifically into the Google and I'll talk also about Facebook realm. What's your contract with the people to whom you're giving the information, and what safeguards are there in that contract? We're going to talk about all these in a little bit more detail. Then the ethics of the holder of your information. That's about trust. Do I trust Facebook? Do I trust Google to hold on to my information and not make ill use of it that I would not support? That's a matter of trust. And then finally, the strength or weakness of the aggregation tools. Keeping my information private to a large extent is about making sure that no one can link ID 1 with ID 2 and put the picture together, put all the puzzle pieces together about who I am or what I'm doing. Okay, so let's talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. Okay, first of all, your desire to disclose information. I don't need to say a whole lot more about this. I think you get the idea. I just like this little idea of over-disclosure. And what I want you to do, however, is just understand it. Think about it. Think about the idea of disclosure. How much do I disclose to whom and under what circumstances, and what harm would come to me if I disclose this information and it got out? I think one thing that's very safe to say is that you really don't have control when you put something on a computer about what ultimately happens to it. You can have a lot of trust, you can be more or less sure, but in the end you're not entirely sure. And so your desire, good morning, your desire to disclose information really is your first security measure or your first privacy measure. If you don't disclose it, it can't be used. Okay, end user agreements. So these are the contracts. And I looked around really hard to try and find something about your data use agreement with Google, and a couple of things came up that I think are just worth pointing to. So first of all, this is your end use agreement. And the interesting thing that I'll point to about your user agreement, your contract with Google, is simply using Google search according to this contract constitutes you agreeing with them about what the fair use of your data on Google is. So it says here in like whatever it is, 2.2.b, that simply using a Google service constitutes an agreement. That's very different than a lot of other software programs. In fact, the vast majority of other software programs where you actually agree to the terms of use. Now, you never read the terms of use. Very, very few people do. Certainly, I don't read the terms of use. But you did agree to them. You did click something physically. Here, the mere act of using the software is what constitutes the handshake, the agreement that you're using Google. Okay, so let me point to a couple of other things about Google and privacy. So there's what Google says, which is pretty much point blank, we don't sell your information to anybody. And they're not all that specific about it. So what I want to do is give you the Google story as much as I can come up with it, and then give you some of the critiques of the Google story. So the Google story, as much as I can come up with it, is we don't sell your data to anybody. We keep the log files of your search requests, and it's unclear to me whether it's 90 days or 18 months. I've heard tell that Bing, the Microsoft service, keeps it 18 months, and now Google's keeping it 18 months, or is it 90 days? They don't ever associate anything but your IP address with your results, and so it's not personally identifiable information. Those are the things that Google states about, specifically about search, right? The other Google products are a different story entirely. So this is what I came up with. This is a Wikipedia article about the critiques of Google privacy, and one is that that Google might disclose information about you to the authorities if they're subpoenaed, if they're asked by the government to supply information about you. They may very well do that. That their privacy policy is vague and incomplete, and that they don't entirely tell you what's possible to do with their information. And I think that has to have some validity, considering that it was very, very hard for me to even find out what their privacy policy was. They don't consider an IP address to be personally identifiable information, and I think it's pretty clear that an IP address can be, isn't always. Now remember, the IP address is the address, the unique identifier for your computer on the internet. That's probably the best way to think about it. The IP address is the unique identifier for your computer on the network. Now, if I know the unique identifier for your computer and I also know who's using that computer, I can link it to you. On the other hand, lots of times that IP address changes, like maybe every time you log on to your network, it changes your IP address, or your IP address is what's called a proxy. It's not really your IP address, it's just one that's assigned to you by your internet provider or something like that. So it's not entirely linkable to your computer, or maybe you're using a computer in an internet cafe that really isn't tiable to you. So it's not entirely clear whether or not your IP address is personally identifiable or not, but Google, at least according to this, takes that to be non-personally identifiable information, so it can give IP addresses. And in fact, it says in some of the things that I read that your location on the internet may be given to other people. Okay, what else? That you're not always able to opt out. And let me briefly give this idea of opt out. I'll come back to it again later. Opt out means that you can decide not to be part of whatever it is they're doing, whatever program it is, or you can opt out of them capturing data. And according at least to this, that many Google services don't allow you to opt out. So as far as I know, well, no, there are ways actually that you can opt out, meaning choose not to have Google collect information about you. The first and foremost is you can get rid of your cookies. You can get rid of the cookies. But at least according to some of the criticisms of Google, if you get rid of your cookies, a lot of their services just don't work very well. Okay, so why is it in the interest, and this is a good question, it's for Facebook and it's also for Google, why is it in their interest to keep their privacy policy sort of vague and to give themselves some wiggle room? Because of what we've talked about many times in this course, which is that your information is hugely valuable to them. Now for Google, it's a lot about advertising, and advertising depends on them knowing what people are doing. So collecting information about you is a major deal. It's really kind of their core property that they have. It's what they make. You know, Ford makes cars, Google makes information. And the more identifiable the information is, the more powerful it is to them in order to sell it back to advertisers, in order to make money from it. And so it's obvious that it's in their interest not to have this information not to have this information, to have this information as connected and rich as possible, to be able to keep it for as long as possible. And so there's a dichotomy there. They want to assure you of your privacy, but your lack of privacy is what helps them make money. All right, let's talk about the Facebook user agreement now. Facebook has come quite a way in their user agreement. When I first started looking at Facebook user agreements, they were very non-specific and they did not make any nods at all to privacy, but Facebook has come under increasing pressure to be very clear about their data use policies, and so now their user agreement is relatively specific about what it says, but we'll also see that there's a big piece of wiggle room in their agreement as well. Okay, so their user agreement starts with this phrase: you own all of the content and information. And I like that, content and information, as if, well, I don't even know what the difference is between those two. Content and information you post on Facebook. Okay, that's pretty clear. You are the owner. Now, if you look down here in point 1 under that, however, you grant Facebook the right to basically do whatever they want, pending your security and privacy settings with the information that you post. Okay, so let me turn that into plain English. Basically, Facebook is saying, we're clear, you own this information. However, you've given us the right to use this information, and you can modify how we do that by changing your privacy and security settings. Okay, so this is bringing us to a really big issue here that I'll summarize later on, but I'll start out presenting right now, and that's the idea that, well, yeah, you could go and really think about how private you want to make all this information, and you can lock it all down, etc. But who really does? And am I going to take the time to do that? And Facebook is obviously counting on the fact that you aren't, because once again, just like Google, Facebook is really they're at odds with themselves. On the one hand, they want to assure your privacy, they want to assure your rights to your information, but on the other hand, that's big business for them. That's where they're making their money, and so it's really in their own self-interest to capture as much information about you and to keep their options as open as possible with what to do about that information. So they're in a quandary. Okay, and so in a moment we'll talk about, so what stops them from just like grabbing all your information and doing whatever they want with it? And I'll come there in a second. But before I do, I want to just outline some of the issues, and I won't go through all of these issues. This is some of the critiques of Facebook and privacy. And so you can read this list for yourself and decide whether you think these critiques are valid and whether you think that they either encourage you to continue using Facebook or encourage you to not continue using Facebook. Again, as always, I don't have an opinion about this stuff. I'm as clueless about what you should do as anybody else. But I'm not clueless about what the issues are. And so that's what I'd like to do with you in all of these things, is outline the issues, give you the information you need in order to start making your own mind up about this stuff. And more than making up your own mind, help the world come to a new place where we understand this stuff and we know exactly what to do about it. Okay, so the one thing that's ironic about this little article here, so it's the Irish Data Protection Commissioner, and he's going to do this, big investigation of Facebook and decide whether it's okay or not. And right there on the page, you can like this on Facebook. And in fact, when I did a Google search of privacy issues on Facebook, one of the pages that came up was a Facebook page on the privacy issues with Facebook. And so it's a little bit like the fox guarding the chickens. And in fact, all the information that I came up with about Google and privacy, how did I get that information about Google and privacy? I used Google. And so it's sort of like, they're underneath these issues. Facebook is getting underneath the issue of Facebook privacy, and Google is getting underneath, or can get if they want to, underneath the issue of Google privacy. Now, would Google suppress a page that was critical of them? My guess is they wouldn't. My guess is that would backfire and that would really blow up on them. And let's talk for a moment now about this idea of what might backfire on these guys and why they pay so much attention. Facebook has paid a tremendous amount of attention to privacy and making sure that your privacy is guaranteed and that sort of stuff. And why? Both in the case of Facebook and in the case of Google, in the case of Google, they run on trust. If we all stop trusting them with our personal information, they're going to go tank instantaneously. Imagine if those 800 million people on Facebook all decided that Facebook was untrustworthy and they decided to kill their accounts. Facebook would die tomorrow. Facebook runs on trust just like the rest of the world, and so it's really, really, really necessary for them to maintain your perception of trust. And so that's a big issue. Is it that they're maintaining your trust, or is it that they're maintaining the perception of your trust? Absolutely, for sure, they have to maintain the perception of trust. It's up to you to decide whether they're actually maintaining your trust. But Facebook will do everything possible to maintain the appearance of being trustworthy because we're trusting them with all of our information. If we stop trusting them, we're going to go away. Same thing for Google. Why is Google so important? Because everybody pays attention, because everybody is trusting them with their advertising, with trusting them with being the search engine, and that could go away tomorrow as well. So all of these very large companies depend on all of our trust, and so they're going to have to maintain that trust. Otherwise, they're going to die, and they'll die instantly, as we've seen lots of big sites die instantly because people leave. They came really quickly, they could leave really quickly. Okay, so finally, this idea of the strength of aggregation. You remember that I said that the more possible it is to aggregate information across all of the different identities that you have, the more possible it is to build a complete picture of you. And so what's the strength of the aggregation? Well, I came across this article that kind of gives maybe the state of the art. And it's about a U.S. government organization that's commissioning a project to look at all the social networking and all the publicly available information across Latin America to try and do what? To try and figure out what's going on in Latin America, and also to try and figure out, is it okay? Is it okay for us? Now, doesn't that sound a lot like data warehousing? That is the idea of data warehousing, right? We put a lot of data in the warehouse, and then we decide what's going on and what should we do about it. Well, governments would like to know that about the population at large. In Latin America, what's going on right now? What are the big trends? What are people talking about? And B, is it okay? Do we need to, do some covert military action because it's not okay? We see that all of a sudden something's going to happen. There's going to be an attack on the American embassy or something like that. So it's not only corporations that are doing this data aggregation and data mining to try and find the bits of information that they really are concerned about. It's governments as well. And I like this idea of the data eye in the sky. Eye in the sky refers to satellites that are looking down on populations and seeing what's going on. This is a data eye in the sky, and this is kind of the Whether or not this is okay, that's up for you to decide, but I'll say kind of what's going on. It's massive data mining across all of the sources of information that are available freely on the internet to try and figure out from a government standpoint what's going on and what should we do. So the strength of aggregation, my personal opinion is that the strength of aggregation is still far below your ability to create information, and it's still very hard to aggregate all the information about you, but how long will it be till it's possible to aggregate all that information? And what's really maybe more to the point is not could they aggregate information, but once they've aggregated information, what sense could they make out of it? So we've already said that if you could aggregate your entire identity across the entire internet, it might not make any sense because you do different things in different places. And so are you going to attack the American embassy or are you not going to attack the American embassy? It may not be possible to tell. And of course, the people who are going to attack the American embassy, are they going to be so silly as to say that? Or will they be more covert? And will it just be tons and tons of data about people who have no intentions of doing anything contrary to the interests of either a corporation or a government, and teeny little bits of information, that needle in a haystack of the people who are? And that's really the big issue for data mining for national security, is that's a huge haystack and there's very little needles, and those needles are very small because the people who really do have ill intent know how to hide their tracks. Okay, issues in privacy. And this is a big one, I think. This one is one of my favorites, especially for people of the age of this class, 18 to 25, let's say. Is privacy as important? Do you care about privacy as much as people who are older? People who are older care about privacy a lot, and it's a big issue, and it keeps them from using a lot of social networking tools. It keeps them from even using their computers because they feel like someone's watching them and all the data is tracked. But my impression is that people of and my target audience for this video, your age, aren't that concerned about it, and that it's not as big an issue. And if your personality or your identity is disclosed, or if your employers find that you were on the beach with a beer bong or something like that, not that big a deal. And so I will talk some more about this in class, and I'll probe you guys specifically to see how much of a big deal it is to you. So then there's the issue of what should and what shouldn't be private. Huge issue, totally untapped. What information about me should be publicly available? What information about me should be protected? Huge debates about that, and hopefully now you have at least a little bit of an edge in trying to be part of those debates. Can stuff really ever be gone? That's a clear answer to that issue. No. Are the security tools we have right now adequate to the task? Short answer to that, no. They are not adequate to the task. There's nothing that can't be hacked. There's nothing that can't be found out if people try really hard. So no, you can't delete stuff. No, security is not absolute. You can't really protect your security against people who are committed to finding your information. Balancing personalization and privacy. Now this is a good one, and this is a really good one. How much, and actually maybe I'll put that off into the next slide because I think I have more to say about that in terms of a balance. So let me just say this last one, which I did mention a little bit already, and I want to come back to again now, and that's the idea that that any hurdle that you put in front of people to controlling their privacy is too big of a hurdle. So for example, I could read the user agreement for every software product that I use, but am I gonna? No way, too big of a hurdle. And even if I did, I wouldn't really understand it. It's like a full-time job, right? You have to be a lawyer in order to understand all this stuff and really understand what the implications of all the choices you have. So there's tons and tons of choices, and an organization can say, hey, you can totally protect your security if you just go into this obscure menu in this place and you choose this button and you choose that button. But it would take a lawyer to understand the issues, and it would take a computer scientist to figure out all the different ways, and it would take a full-time job just for you to control all of the things that you do on an individual basis to make sure that your information is protected. So those are hurdles. And every time you put up a little hurdle, people will just blow by it. You don't really pay attention to it. The Facebook policy changed, and Facebook even put something in your face that says it's changed and you should go check this out. And you don't because you're busy, and what you really want to do is chat, or what you really want to do is post that new video or whatever. So I want to also give you this idea of opt-in and opt-out. And it's a big deal. Opt-in means you're not part of this thing until you say you want to be. Opt-out means you are part of it until you say you don't want to be. And it makes all the difference in the world. Opt-in means that it's not going to happen unless people take that extra effort. Opt-in, opt-out, sorry, means it's going to happen unless you take that extra effort. So if you were Facebook, what would you do? Or Google, what would you do? Would you make your privacy settings opt-in or opt-out? You want them to be opt-out because you want people to have the lowest privacy settings unless they say otherwise. And unless there's a lot of pressure on you to make them opt-in, you're going to keep them opt-out because that's in your interest. So the interest of organizations is to keep your data as open and easy for them to use as possible. And your interest is, I don't know what your interest is. Your interest is probably not as open and free as possible, but maybe it's not also as closed and locked down as possible. And brings us kind of to the conclusion. The bottom line of privacy. You give information, unless you decide not to give any information, but that's not how most people are going to operate. Most people are going to say, I'll give some information, and you get services and you get a better user experience as a result. Putting profile information into Facebook, using Facebook at all, putting any information in there, doing Google searches, that gives you a lot of value. And in fact, as I've said before, a huge amount of value that you're not paying for. It doesn't cost anything. We've talked about the mechanics of Google. That's a huge amount of value that Google is giving you, and you're not paying anything for it. It's completely free, except for the information that you provide to Google. That's what your eyeballs and your personal information are what you're giving back to Google. So it's your calculation. You do the math. What information do I want to give? What am I getting back for it? And is it worth it? And unfortunately, there's no easy way around this. It's something you just have to think about, and you have to think about it on a case-by-case basis. So in the end, all of us need to come to some way of taking care of these issues, being able to understand, how do I judge authority? How do I judge privacy? When do I give up information? When don't I give up information? Do I trust these guys? Do I not trust these guys? What would happen? What would be the worst case if this information got out? Balanced against your ability, for example, in Google, to search the World Wide Web instantaneously with this really fantastic, amazing ability to get to the world's encyclopedia of information. Now, what's that worth to you? You do the math.